young life, emerging, growing, its development a question mark. In our modern world, a child and its vulnerable ego are all too soon placed in the crossfire of conflicting stresses and strains, reflected at the youngster the harsh surface of his adult contacts. In our headlong race through life, a child's needs for adult acceptance and ego fostering are not always properly met. The child is sometimes lost in the labyrinth of our confused existence. His conflicts too often left unsolved, unnoticed. The resultant emotional maladjustment may be expressed aggressively, violently, right in the home, between rivaling siblings, or the aggression may be directed toward the wider world. The maladjustment may also be displayed in arrested development. An older boy, children his age, and plays with smaller, younger children. A boy whose sister is preferred may emulate her by being feminine and playing with girls. A seriously withdrawn youngster, unable to bring himself to join in play, mopes alone, an unhappy isolate. These types of maladjustments, treatments and treatment. This may take several forms, one of which is activity group therapy. Here each child acts out his problems and finds his own corrective interest, with the therapist remaining as passive as possible. After the intake interview, each child is discussed in conference. If accepted, he is grouped with others according to his specific problems and with an eye toward achieving a group balance. Under discussion at the moment is the case of Bob.
Bob, age 9½, was referred to the agency by his school principal, and I am recommending him for exclusive group therapy. Bob is in a class for gifted children, where he's a disturbing element, frequently clowning and talking out of turn. Bob occasionally wets his bed, has temper tantrums, and cannot accept limitations. He's an unhappy child and is avoided by other children. Bob slept in the parental bedroom until the birth of a younger sibling, when he was 5, at which time he began to neglect his appearance and refused to bathe. According to his mother, the boy has always been restless and extremely hyperactive. The mother is an over-anxious, inconsistent, inadequate person who has invested a great deal in the boy's school achievement. The father's warm, but has a quick temper. Bob likes his father.
Bob seems to be reacting to his mother's basic rejection of him for the younger sibling. Is that right?
Yes, the mother impressed me as a person who felt deeply inadequate as a wife and as a mother.
We will accept Bob for exclusive group therapy. The unconditional acceptance by and the relationship with the therapist, together with free acting out of his impulses and aggressions in a permissive environment, should serve to counteract the boy's feelings of insecurity and stabilize his behavior. However, little can be done for this child, in my opinion, without enlisting the cooperation of the mother, and she should be referred for treatment as well.
As the conferences progress, other cases are discussed. The group in which Bob is placed, and which we're going to follow, consists only of boys. Girls are treated in separate groups. Bob's group includes Albert, who is suspected of being a latent schizophrenic. Albert was
referred for exclusive group therapy. He resists going to school, is afraid of the dark, of animals, and of children. He insists on helping with the housework and with the cooking. He plays only with little girls because he says boys' games are too rough. He has severe temper outbursts, pretends he's a gangster, shadow boxes with and shoots at his own image in the mirror. He peeps when his mother is dressing and bursts into the bedroom when his parents are alone. His mother's disappointed in Albert. She prefers his sister 5 years younger. When Albert developed cysts on his breast at the age of 2 years, the mother feared that he would turn into a girl. The father is passive, self-centered, resents Albert's effeminacy, and beats him at times.
In addition to other personality problems, Albert has a character disorder. The value of the group to such a boy is that he will be able to establish masculine identifications, sublimate his masturbatory drives through work with his hands, and freely express his hostilities. But Albert will...
Included are Mortimer, age 11, immature, fearful, stutters. Diagnosis, 10, insecure, disruptive, provocative, varied and doubtful diagnosis, a severe case.
And now, Mr. Scharlinger, I think you have another case for us for today.
Yes, and a somewhat difficult one. Henry, an only child, aged 10 and a half, was brought to the agency recently by his mother. She complained of the boy being shy and his fear of children and adults. Henry avoids all children. He even crosses the street when he sees them at play. He is extremely dependent and attached to his mother and rarely leaves her. Since about a year ago, he complains of headaches and pains in the leg. No organic basis for these has been found. He also has diffuse fears of being hurt and attacked. However, Henry does crave friends. Once, when he met a boy, he ran to his mother, announcing that he now had a friend.
Let's accept him for group therapy. But a psychiatric conference to clarify the diagnosis and the psychodynamics is desirable in this case.
The psychiatrist, Dr. Van Uphuizen, reviewed Henry's case and arrived at a diagnosis of anxiety hysteria.
Now, with regard to the treatment, I am in favor of trying group psychotherapy, as you suggested. I do feel that the boy will probably form an attachment to the leader very soon, and under this protective influence will relate to the other boys with much less anxiety.
So Henry also joins the group. The setting for this type of therapy is always simple. The room is devoid of all adornment and is designed to encourage children's free and spontaneous activity. All cabinets and work tables are made of ordinary planks of wood. At the first few sessions, the therapist sets out the materials on a table before the children arrive. Placing the materials on the table and exposing the tools and games provides visual stimulation and suggestion for activity. When the boys arrive, the therapist introduces them to one another. He does not, however, suggest projects or occupations. At the first session, The boys attach themselves to the therapist and follow him about. After a period of acclimatization, contact is made among the boys. This is the beginning step in breaking down isolation. After a while, if left alone, each finds something that interests him. This is Henry, the boy who has an inordinate fear of children. Note the anxious sucking movements of his lips. The therapist attempts to make him feel at ease. He introduces Henry to the other boys, but this makes Henry even more uncomfortable. Sensing this, the therapist leaves him and returns to helping one of the boys. This is good for Henry, for he sees the therapist as a helpful, positive person. The boy who is running is Bob. The free atmosphere of the group encourages him to act out his hyperactivity and distractibility, two of the main problems for which he was referred. The therapist now withdraws completely from the activity, letting the group take over. Henry withdraws into isolation, aimlessly working a dry paintbrush back and forth. This stooping posture is characteristic of the boy, and his anxiety is reflected in the movement of his lips. In these groups, all types of behavior are tolerated, and Henry's isolation does not evoke comment or derision. For some 45 minutes, Henry remains rooted to this spot. But gradually, he steals more and longer glances at the other boys, reflecting his awareness of their presence. The technique of leaving materials exposed proves its effectiveness when Henry picks up the table tennis ball and paddle. Henry divides his attention between watching the activities in the room and playing with the ball.
We'll have our breakfast. That's fine.
Just as expected in these groups, an overt struggle suddenly breaks out.
I'm going to leave that to you, yeah? I mean, I take it back. I need a heavy one. This is the one I love. Wait, what is it? See, Mommy? Who's that my name is Pop? It'll be fine when I get through with you. Oh, yeah? Oh, yeah. About half an hour.
The struggle is resolved, and the adult did not interfere. The heat from the floodlights is affecting Robert. He yells, "Bring on the women," and demonstrates his brute force. Henry continues to move about. As he gains security, he tests his skill by sending the ball higher and higher. This draws him into a position closer to the other boys, but he has not spoken a word yet. Albert, the effeminate boy, arrives late. The therapist welcomes him. Albert is cautious, though seemingly not too frightened.
Here's another one. I'm David.
Note how Albert delicately pats his hair and adjusts his collar. His movements are not characteristic of a real boy. Albert moves about the room and investigates it. This is the warm-up, or period of acclimatization. Henry is absent from the scene. He has again withdrawn. This time he has hidden himself in a large packing case, which is out of range of the concealed cameras.
Have you got any thinner, hey, why did Patrick no? Hey, Woody! The thing is nearly dry already. What's that is? Not salmon.
All right, boys, let's clean up.
Albert's feminine characteristics are even more in evidence when he addresses another boy. Some time later, the therapist begins to clear away and, by suggestion, indicates that the cleanup phase of the session has been reached, preparatory to refreshments. But the boys ignore the suggestion. In this way, they express their disobedience and also test the therapist. When one of the boys asks for help on his ashtray, the therapist assists him. He thus passes the test. He is not a prohibitor, but a sanctioner.
With a ruler. Yeah.
Hey, what's this, Marty? Marty, what's this thing over here? Hey,
That's the
David.
bench stuff. It's stuffing a piece of wood. You know that you want to work on
You want this?
stiff.
How do you pick it up? There's no more paper.
At early sessions, the therapist sets the stage for refreshments. It's expected the boys will assume this responsibility later on. Typically, the passive boys are first to take seats at the table, but at a distance away from the therapist. After 50 minutes inside the packing case, Henry now emerges, tempted by the refreshments. Fearfully, Henry takes a roundabout way and sneaks up to the table, as it were. Note the increased twitching of his lips, which accompanies his mounting anxiety. After a while, the more resistive youngsters are won over by the food and by the therapist's permissive attitude.
Oh, I know what kind of mirror this is. The mirror on one side and the window on the other.
When it's time to end the session, the therapist does not tell the boys to leave. Instead, he is put on his coat as a form of suggestion. Most of the boys soon leave, including Henry, who has not spoken a single word during the entire 2-hour session. Bob and Robert stay on dawdling, passively defying the therapist, and again testing him. The therapist lets the boys take their time, once more passing the test.
I'll see you next Tuesday. Oh, I'll come back later. I'll see you next Tuesday. All right? You want to leave it here? You want to Good night.